What up, YouTube? So today we're working on a 3D printer. This is a printer that I brought here in my luggage to the Philippines. And I'm just getting ready with some glue here. This is 2-part epoxy. These are pretty loose. I got these zip ties kind of holding them in place. And what I'm going to do now is glue all this stuff down. This is the easiest way I found to do this. Sometimes I'll balance these on the bearings to get it to line up. A lot of people I see online, they just measure it and then they put it on the bed, kind of pre-drilling the holes and mounting it before they put it on the bed. And I've had a lot of trouble doing that before, where basically I end up having just a small misalignment and it doesn't kind of go as smooth as I think it could or should. So this is kind of a little bit of a trick I've learned here, just to make sure that everything's perfectly aligned when it comes to the bed mounts and the bearings here. So the first thing I'm going to be gluing down is this belt tensioner holder piece. So the belt tensioner holder doesn't really matter as much. You definitely want to make sure that it's glued down nice and firm, so your bed, there's no moving of the bed when the belt goes from one direction to the other. And now with this, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on here. And then you kind of want to do this fast so the glue doesn't have time to stiffen up too much. So what I'm going to do now is take this, make sure I've got my wires facing the right way. Then I'm going to set these down onto the bearings here, making sure the zip ties are not in the way at all. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow for some minute adjustments. And I'll kind of move it around a little bit, and then I'm just going to hold it down. I'm going to press it down for a moment. So as you can see here, the 3D printer is mostly assembled. I brought this frame here in pieces. It's a 3D printed frame, not ideal. At home, in the United States, I have some metal frames that I had cut at a CNC shop. But this was one of the first frames I ever made. It was for the second printer I made. I printed this out using the first printer I made. And as you can see, all these parts here are also 3D printed. That I printed myself. This is basically Prusa i3. It's a rough adaptation of that. I had some trouble finding the smaller 5mm bolts, so I ended up just gluing these to my what would that be? To my Y axis here. But as you can see here, I've got the frame. All the smooth rods and threaded rods I were able to find here in the Philippines. I didn't want to bring those with me because of the weight, so I just brought the electronics, the frame, these parts, and the motors. And I actually brought enough parts for 2 printers. This one, as you can see, has a little bit bigger working zone than your typical 3D printer. It's 300 by 200 millimeters. Typical size is 200 by 200 millimeters. I was unable to find couplers, and the plastic ones that I had printed out unfortunately didn't really fit in here, but I was able to find some 5mm plastic tubing, and I just glued that in there to make my couplers there to hold this threaded rod. The threaded rod, I did say it was 5mm, but it's actually 1/4 inch. I was unable to find 5mm threaded rod here, just like this threaded rod is also standard. It's 5/16. I was kind of surprised coming here to the Philippines that I was unable to find the metric rods that I thought I'd be able to. This smooth rod, though, I did find in the metric size, so that's good. And now that it's been a little bit, I'm just going to kind of let up on that, take a look underneath, make sure everything's holding together. It looks like it needs a couple more moments here. So I'm just kind of applying some downward pressure until that glue dries. It is a little bit stinky, so we're going to make sure we've got the window open here. We turned off the fan for the recording of the video, but ideally you'd have a little bit more air movement in here because I can smell this epoxy glue and it's kind of toxic, so something you want to try to avoid. And once this dries, I'm going to be hooking up this belt here, and then I'm basically at a point where I'm going to start doing all the wiring and stuff. Once I've got most of the wiring done and my ramps board all set up, I'm going to then mount an extruder here, and that extruder I'm going to be using a more modern extruder, and we'll be going over that in just a minute. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm wiring my stepper motors. So this is wiring that I've already kind of done here. I've taken the original wires coming from the plug that came with the motor and added a bit of an extension here, just with some stuff I was able to find in the electronics store. I'm not sure what these plugs were for, but this pin is just a really generic pin that's used in a lot of electronics. So on this ramps board that I have, the motors are actually labeled X, Y, and Z, and that's these three stepper motors here. So I'm just going to be plugging those in, and then I'm going to be using this extruder. It's kind of a bit of a mess, but I'm sure I'll be able to bring it back to life. This was on another printer I had, and it was working out really good. So I can't exactly remember the name of it, but it's kind of nice. It's got like a double pinching mechanism, double geared pulling method there on the inside, and so I'll be posting the exact extruder that this is in the description, but that's going to come next. So right now I'm just focused on getting all these motors wired up. So I just hooked up the X axis, and I'm going to be hooking up the Y axis, and then we're going to be going with the Z axis. So the way that that's going to work is I'm going to put all of these wires, they have a red, black, blue, and purple. So I'm going to put red on right, just because that's easy to remember, and I feel like that's something that I would have done in the first place. I don't know if this ramps board is programmed at all, so I'm going to be checking that out momentarily after I get all these plugged in. But right now I'm just hooking up these wires so I can do some of the first round of testing on everything to see if I've got any issues that I'm going to have while setting up the rest of this. But it's pretty easy to switch these. You can either switch them in the software, or you can just literally unplug them and turn the connector around and plug it back in. And the way that these motors are designed is that we'll switch the polarity there. So it is a little bit of a delicate thing wiring this up. The wires are really small, and so are the connections. So you just got to be aware of that. Be kind of firm yet gentle when you're hooking this stuff up, so that way you don't bend any of the connecting pins or accidentally maybe pull out the wires. Like when I'm unplugging this stuff, I'm always pulling on the plastic part as much as I can and trying to pull on the wires evenly as well, so that way I don't just like rip out any of the wires. As you can see, a lot of this stuff is pre-wired. I did have this printer set up in the States, So I'm kind of starting with a kind of like a kit, so to say, which is a lot nicer. I did build this originally from scratch. So here I've got the power supply, and I was kind of worried for a minute because I know in the States everything's 110 and here in the Philippines everything's 220, but thankfully these are 110 and 220, but it's really important that I switch this over. So there's just a little switch right there to switch it into 220 mode, so that way when I plug it in to the outlet here, it doesn't just fry on me. So this is a pretty basic power supply. As you can see, I need to actually rewire a common computer plug. 3-prong plug is what I use here. And I'll see if I have the external piece for this. I did bring a bunch of extra wiring and stuff with me. There's the connector cable. I'm just going to assume it's down here. But it's really nice when we can use it. Oh yeah, here we go. So I am going to have to do a little bit of soldering here. But I've got this set up with this cool little adapter I printed on here. So basically I'm going to come in here and rewire the live, the neutral, and the ground wire back into this. And then this thing will just snap on here some way. Yeah, it goes like this. So basically I'll have a nice little setup here. I'll install a switch on it. And then I'll have the wires, I'll pull them through this hole here. And that way it's kind of nice and clean. I don't really like having connectors and stuff exposed where I might shock myself, or maybe someone else that I invite to come look at my printer gives themselves a good jolt, or worse, maybe gets injured from the electricity. So I really like to do things like this, set it up nice with a concealed way. And I can put a little switch on here so it's easy to turn on and off. And it just makes everything a lot smoother when you're using it, and a lot safer for everybody as well. So that's just going to go in there like that. I'll do a little bit of soldering, put a switch on there, and then this will plug in to here. So I can just take that out, and then I'll just wire those into there. It goes plus minus, I believe. Yeah, plus minus, so plus minus. If you're looking at the back, plus minus. And that'll wire onto these. And as you can see, they're nice thick wires. So this heating board does pull quite a bit of wattage. And I am a little bit concerned. I've been able to get away with using these bigger heated beds on strictly the ramps, heating MOSFETs there, but I have had issues where even just using a normal size bed has burned out that power supply there. So they do make an external board you can get that kind of works as an extra switch, and it provides a little bit more power. It has its own source of power there for heating the bed, because that is the most demanding part of the printer when it comes to power demand. So that's something good to keep in mind. So I'm going to do some soldering here, and then we can move on to the next step. Thanks for watching. Alright, so I got my wires here. Now, just going to put them in a convenient place. Got my soldering gun. Just going to get these nice and ready. re-priming these, so to speak. So I've got it loaded with a bit of solder here. At this point, it doesn't really matter which wire I hook up to what, but since I've got one that's a little bit longer than the other, it will make a bit of a difference when I get to the end. So I'm just going to heat this up real good. See, I'm kind of melting the plastic here. My work environment isn't the best. I'm trying to move this one so you can see it a little bit better. This nice and hot. Got that on there. I'm going to add a little bit more solder because I'm not really satisfied with the amount that's on it. So it's really good to be patient with this stuff. I'm using some flux core, so I don't have to worry about adding flux. It's kind of adds another layer of difficulty. You've got to worry about doing that. There we go. Okay. Now I've got a really healthy amount on there. Just gonna get this heated up again. Nice and tight. I'll do this next one. So we got the fan going this time because it's definitely not something you want to be huffing. Because the solder has lead in it, and I'm sure you all know how bad lead is. Heat this up. Real good. I'm gonna re-prime this. It's not really sticking that well, but I can feel that the wire is getting pretty hot. So Put some more solder on this too. Just a dab. There we go. Like this. Hold the two together. There we go. Okay. I got those attached. And I got my green end also attached here. Just unplug the soldering iron. Set it in a safe place, let it cool down. Okay. And now I just simply wire these into here. And with AC power, it doesn't necessarily matter too much, but I'm definitely going to make sure I get the neutral wire plugged in to the right spot. So I'm just going to double check that before I do. I do believe that when I'm looking at the plug this way, the neutral is on the left and the load is on the right. But I'm going to double check that, and you should definitely double check that too, with whatever country you're in and how those outlets are. And since there's no ground here in the Philippines, what I'm going to do, I'm going to double check, make sure it's not going to fire anything, but it really shouldn't. I'm going to jump the ground to the neutral connection here. And I'll just provide a little layer of safety and prevent the electronics from getting fried possibly, and also prevent any sort of area that I can shock myself. So, alright. That's it for this bit. Alright, so I got most of the electronics wired up. Now I'm just getting ready to hook up the extruder. One of the harder things, you gotta kind of have 5 hands to do it. So first I'm gonna move this belt around. That's this right here. Pull this through here. Then wrap it around the motor shaft. Okay. Probably have to trim this belt. Yeah, definitely have to trim it down. So, one thing I'm going to need is some scissors. Can you grab the scissors for me? So we've got quite a bit done here. As you can see, I've got the power wired up, and there's the power supply. I decided not to have a switch. Now I'm just putting a new backing plate on here. I've got the bearings already on here. Makes things quite a bit easier to have the bearings all done up. Be kind of delicate here. So I got all this wiring everywhere. So first I'm going to push it up against the bearings here. And I'm going to pull this wire tight, or this belt here tight. I'm going to measure where I need to cut. Tuck it in there a little bit. Okay. Got the bearings where I want them. This is where it should be. I just screw this in on the back here. Once that first one's in, you can kind of take a breather. Plastic out of there. The second screw set in there. As you can see, the X-axis is pretty wobbly, especially with all this weight on the top of it. So one of the next things I'll be doing is adding some supports to it. You can see here on the left side I've got one support already on there, which is nice and tight. Put in the third one here. Caught the nut there. You want to make sure these are nice and snug. Alright. There we have it. A little bit of a bulge in the middle, not really liking that, but it shouldn't affect anything too much. Now I just put on this custom mounted piece here. This is my BL Touch. So that's definitely, looks like it might be a little bit too tall. We'll see. It should be right on the money, but time will tell. So there we go. And that is definitely too loose, so I'm probably just going to end up gluing that after I confirm that it's low enough that it's going to actually trigger it, and not too low that it gets in the way of the nozzle, but it does appear to be in the right spot. And got my end stop here. It snaps on there. Okay, there we have it. That is the extruder mounting. Got this massive mess of wire here. One thing I've learned to do, if you've noticed, is to have backups for the hot end heating. So I've got an extra one here. I'll just tie that up nice and good. And what that's going to do is make sure that if this one fails, or if I want to add another extruder in there, I've got another hot end. And also, I have a backup thermistor. So that's always a good thing to have. because those are notorious for going out. I've also got an extra one here already mounted inside there on the bed, so if that one goes out, I can literally just plug in the other one and then I'm good to go. So, alright, next step will be testing the end stops and homing and getting everything all calibrated and the belts all tightened up. And one thing I still have to do too is here I need to add a bearing of some sort. Unfortunately, I didn't have quite enough foresight to bring that, so probably just end up using a skateboard bearing. Those are easy enough to find. And yeah, that's it for today.